Welcome back to another week of Meta Snapshot for Shadowverse Worlds Beyond. Guys, we're in the final straight now of the Heirs of the Omen expansion. We've had 8 full weeks of this, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for some new cards. We have been having a steady drip feed of new cards this week, and there's some exciting things coming in. I've done a video on the first batch. I'm about to do another one. So stay tuned to the channel for lots more about Set 4 Skyward Dragons. However, I do think it's good that we wrap up the meta and see where we are in the current state. And even more excitingly, I'm calling this week's version the Shadowverse Open 2025 Grand Finals Edition, because as the name would suggest, this weekend, on the final weekend of this set, we have got the Shadowverse Open Grand Finals going on in Singapore. And just to remind you and cast your mind back, we had 4 Open qualifiers. These were major, massive tournaments, well attended, and we obviously had the winners of those, plus the runner-up, the finalists, and those 8 people from those 4 Opens are the 8 competitors that are playing in a face-to-face live event. So we really are now talking about the cream of the meta, and obviously high-level skill play as well. So we're going to take a big focus of today's is going to be focusing on those decks. But let's start with the overall snapshot as always. So this is it, guys. There's not going to be any surprises for those of you that follow along. By the way, thanks for all the compliments. I've had loads of feedback that people really enjoy this series. So as long as people are enjoying it, I'll keep making content that people want to see. But anyway, as you probably expect, this is kind of nothing major changes. Now, the big kind of argument at the top end is whether you put Modibus and Loot Sword in tier 1 or not. I think you can in terms of the power level, but I do think that Spell Boost and Cresthaven, for me, in all formats, are just a cut above those, because I think they're a little bit more consistent and probably have a little bit of a more consistent win rate against a wider spread of matches as well. But they're very, very close. You could easily put Modibus and Sword in a kind of tier 1.5 if you like. I do find it really difficult exactly where to put them, but I do feel that Crest and Spell Boost have established themselves at the end of this meta as just a slight cut above the rest. In tier 2, these are all very powerful decks, guys. You can take these to ladder, you can climb with, you can go in your weekend tournaments, you can take them to competitive. We see these tier 2 decks winning tournaments, right? We've seen Modibus do that. We've seen Midibus do that. We've certainly seen Combo Roach as a consistent tournament extravaganza, really. It's almost like the tournament deck. But yeah, in tier 2, these are very powerful decks, not quite as consistent as the top 2, but they do well into them. The reason OTK Dragon has made it into tier 2, because we've had multiple people hit the top of the Dragon class rankings with this, and we are seeing a version of it in the finals, which I'll show you. And also it has a pretty good matchup into Crest and Spell Boost, and that's, you know, if you can do well into the top 2 decks in the meta, then that puts you up there as a meta deck itself. The changes to Puppet have been great. We've definitely seen Puppet perform much better since they got the updates that they did in the balance patch. So that's really helped that deck. Combo Roach again. It's a really difficult ladder deck to play. It's a really high skill deck, but it is doing well still against those top 2 tier decks. And Mid-Abyss just gives you a little bit more speed than Modibus, and it allows you to build like really big boards very quickly and just make it quite difficult for your opponent to deal with everything before you can beat them down. So it's called a mid-range Abyss, but it's actually it's actually a kind of like a tempo aggro deck in many ways. And yeah, it's doing very, very well. Now, in tier 3, you will see that I have put Storm Dragon down. I actually do think the OTK Dragon deserves to be above it now, because we've just seen better results with it. And but it's quite close. You know, it's quite close. You know, one's bottom of tier 2, one's top of tier 3. They're fairly close. Storm Dragon can climb on ladder for sure. You will be able to cheese a lot of wins with it. Azudia Control is there because it actually has a pretty good match into late game decks, right? And it also has this alternative, unlike a lot of other OTK decks, it also has this alternative win con. So if it's playing against, for example, something like Sword, or you know, something that's quite fast, it can play into a kind of survive. It's got lots of heal. It's got lots of big wards it can put down, and you can kind of just like not even combo off and win those matches. So that's it, guys. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it. You can all see here, you can read, you've heard, if you watched last week's version, you can go and find lots of examples of these decks. Not much has changed, as you'd expect at the end of the season. So let's jump into the stuff that is of interest right now, and that is the grand finals of the Shadowverse Open. Let's take a look at the decks that they brought as basically examples to the meta snapshot that we just kind of like laid out. All right, so first of all, we have Barrick. Barrick is my guild member and teammate, and he is bringing a Zudia Forestcraft to the Shadowverse Grand Finals, guys. Do you know what kind of cojones you've got to have to bring a Zudia Forestcraft to the Grand Finals of the Shadowverse Open? And especially after, you know, he made a big mistake, and yeah, Reddit and the internet blew up, and you know, everybody was suddenly the best player in the game and judged how terrible he was to make such a mistake. But the point is, you know, he's bringing it to really prove that he can play this deck well, and he's already shown on day one. I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't watched the VOD yet, but he's already shown on day one just how powerful this deck can be. So he's brought a Zudia Forestcraft. The only thing he has changed really since he piloted this deck to victory is I think he's dropped a copy of Lily. And what else did he change on it now? He definitely dropped the Lily, and he also dropped one of the 9 drops. So he's only got 2 of the 9 drops now instead of 3 copies of that. And that allowed him to put a Supplicant in, and in the 6 drop slot, and a Divine Thunder, right? So he's got a Divine Thunder and a 6. So he's just got a little bit more in that kind of answering those mid-game boards and things like Norman in particular. Obviously, he was expecting to play against quite a bit of Rune. Now, the Puppet Portalcraft, he's the only person to bring puppets. But as we said in the tier list, that you know, this is now a deck that has been enhanced greatly from the balance patch, right? Now, you'll see in here, very similar to most puppet decks that you'll see. I guess the things worth talking about are the fact that he runs 3 copies of Jerry. So if you don't draw your Orcuses and you need to kind of pivot into an alternative win con, he's got those Jerrys. That's quite good against things like Abyss, for example, potentially even Haven at times. And then he also runs 2 copies of Fighter. Now, our other kind of one of our other top players in the guild, which is Tagul, who sort of was on the masterclass video that we did with Barrick. If you've not seen that, definitely go back and watch it, particularly if you're interested in Azudia or Modibus, because that was a real masterclass. And by the way, Tagul hit top 3 in the Abyss class rankings this week. So if you want a real deep dive on those 2 decks, go and watch that masterclass video on my channel. But Tagul's suggestion was to keep the Fighter in, and so he's gone with 2 copies of the Fighter, 1 copy of Ruby, and I think everything else is pretty standard, right? We've got 3 copies of Noah in the 6 drop slot, no Sylvias. I think we were debating whether to have a single copy of Sylvia in, but in the end, just gone for 3 copies of Noah. So that is Puppets and Azudia. And then Flying Goatee, he's brought OTK Dragoncraft. So the deck that we just talked about being tier 2 this week. This is a version of the deck. It's not the only version. I actually prefer Teddy's version, where you run a copy of Zell in there. And actually, in one of Flying Goatee's games, it kind of highlighted the point for running Zell, because essentially what happens here is you either draw Fenny first, and then you obviously can discount. You'll get discounted Cocytus and Jerry, and you can do the OTK. Or the other thing that happens is you draw Cocytus before the Fenny, at which point Fenny's kind of useless. And what you then do is you play Cocytus, but then you use Zell as the OTK, because for 10 play points you can basically play the 6 drop that gives you Storm. Forgotten the name of it. So that's 10 damage, and then you play the 1-drop, which is the 13-13, and then Zell, your Super Evo Zell, and it makes the 13-13 go face, and that's 23 damage, 1-turn kill. So in other words, you have a 1-turn kill no matter which way around you bring it, but that is not the version that Flying Goatee brought. He's kind of gone for a bit more streamlined, just obviously focusing more consistently on the path he wants to go down. Yeah, this is kind of very similar to many of the versions that you'll see. Draw very quickly, ramp early game, get the tablet down, thin your deck so you find your combo pieces. Spell Boost Rune, not too much more to say about this deck, guys. You've seen this every single week now since the game came out, pretty much. I'll really point out, rather than going through card by card, anything of interest. I do think that Flying Goatee has put some interesting techs in there. He's put the tablet in, for example. Point of that is that you get to find your Cocytus more frequently. He's also gone for the double Penelope as well, so just making sure that he doesn't run out of dirt, you know, for obviously triggering Normans and things like that. So yeah, kind of a pretty interesting spell boost, to be fair to Flying Goatee. Next up, we've got Cloudy. Cloudy has brought Swordcraft. I believe he's the only player to have brought Swordcraft as well. And my God, this guy can play Loot Sword. I mean, if you want to watch Loot Sword played to perfection, this is the guy to watch. Really got a great, he's got a really good grip of how to navigate this deck effectively, when to use loots, when to not, what to, you know, his mulligan's spot on. He understands the matchup, so playing this really well. I'm also really happy to see that he does run a single copy of Centaur, because I do think when you run the tablet, that these decks that have like double tentacles, well, obviously you're going to lose one copy of that, and so that means you've only got like one of those cards that has that extra reach beyond your Sincero and Albert combos. So by putting the Centaur in, that means you have another thing on top of that, so it just gives you even more reach, right? So really interesting. He does run only a single copy of Zirconia as well. That was the thing I was keen to see at the end of the meta, how many copies of Zirconia. I'd seen some people drop Zirconia completely from the build. That never felt right to me, and it looks like Cloudy believes that the best way is kind of like a half and half. Also, this is a tournament, and don't forget, in tournaments, playing one-offs is quite good because it's open deck list, and so your opponent knows what's in your deck. So if you've got a one-off something, it keeps them guessing, it keeps them thinking, he has actually got that, and they have to play around it. So that's something that Byrick talked about as well in his masterclass video that we did. Now, what's new with his spell boost rune? Cloudy is only one copy of Foresight in there. He is running a single copy of Snowman. I find that a lot of the top spell boost players do enjoy running a single copy of that, and they use it very well. And then you've got the single copy of Elvice and the Divine Thunder in there as well. So quite a few one-offs as well, like we said, just to keep our opponent guessing. Next up, we have DB Tempest. He brought Mode Abysscraft. I think there were a couple, 2 or 3 that did. And his Mode Abyss is a pretty standard Mode Abyss at this stage, guys. I mean, he's got a single copy of Rage of the Serpents in there, and only a single copy of the Chaos Cyclone as well. And that's enabled him to put double Medusa in. So that's the kind of interesting tech for me when I look at that list, the double Medusa. And again, if you're expecting lots of rune in a tournament, then that just means that you're much more guaranteed to have an answer to Norman, and it's such a good answer at that. So yeah, very interesting. Spell Boost rune, he has gone for pretty... is it a pretty standard version? No, he's also brought the Divine Thunder. Seems to be a tech that a lot of people have put in. Obviously, it can really help in the mirror. Again, Divine Thunder's not bad against Norman. So I am assuming that that's kind of the main reason for that tech. Artify brought mid-range Abysscraft. I think he was the only one to do that. There might have been one other. We will see. Interestingly, even though he's playing mid-range, he still runs a single copy of Medusa. And again, I do think that's probably to burst through those kind of those ward walls, right? Whether it's Wilbert if you're playing against Crest, or whether it is the Norman that we just talked about. Other than that, it's pretty standard. There just seem to be pretty much 2 flex spots in the mid-range Abyss, and it looks like he's gone for a Medusa and a Jinsetsu. Some people play a third copy of the Undead Soldier. Like I said, there's a little bit of flex that you can do. But other than that, it's pretty much the standard deck that we have been seeing. I do like the Medusa tech because if you're trying to beat down, the last thing you want to do is just get stuck by a Norman and the whole game is kind of comes to a standstill. Now, the big thing in Artifice Spell Boost Rune is that he brought the Illusion of Conjuration, or whatever it's called, the 2-drop that makes your hand more expensive but does give you hard removal. And definitely, without spoiling anything, go and watch the gameplay on the VOD, because honestly, this card actually did some work. So, kind of spicy tech coming into one of the most established decks that we've seen throughout, not just this meta and this particular set, but the entire lifespan, right? A Shadowverse Worlds Beyond spell boost has been there from the beginning. So really interested to see what Illusionary Conjurer. I haven't tried it out. Go ahead and test it out. If you have, let me know in the comments how it has worked out for you. Really spicy, and 2 copies of the Edelweiss as well. Next up, we have EMT Sai, and he brought Crest Haven and Spell Boost Rune. Now, Spell Boost Rune is, yeah, pretty typical kind of deck, really. There's nothing too spicy to note, other than the fact he runs double Kakaitas. So instead of going down the tablet route to get more consistency, he just stuck a second Kakaitas in. And I've seen a few people do that on ladder as well. Now, the thing that Sai is mainly known for is piloting really well his version of Crest Haven. And as you'll note, the big difference that he has here is he runs double Rodeo. He also runs triple Temple, right? Now, think about the OTK decks that are in the meta right now. This is pretty scary, really scary, actually. I mean, imagine like being Azudia control and coming up against this, right? And your combo does 20 damage, but if it bounces off a barrier, you do 0. So 3 copies of Temple is really interesting, but obviously Rodeo pulls 3 amulets out of the deck, right? So he also has the tablet. He's not looking to play the tablet necessarily and thin the deck. He's looking to pull it from Rodeo. And then you have constant card draw. And this and that allows him to drop like the 1-drops, for example. That's the Serene Sanctuaries and things like that, because he's not worried about running out of card draw. It's a really interesting way of playing Crest. It's a little bit different. You can also do some pretty cool things, like when you've got the Grimnir Crest down, and then you play Rodeo and Super Evo. Like you can just like do some really good board clears and things like that. Not running Jean either. That's also very interesting. It is Crest Haven, but it is quite a different way of building Crest Haven. So for those of you who are kind of like complaining that meta's getting stale or anything like that, then definitely worth taking a look at this style of playing it. Okay, next up we have got Yan. Now, Yan also brought Crest Haven, and also, interestingly, a similar version to Sai. He did also choose to go with the Rodeo and the different amulets. A few changes, obviously, from size. The big thing is he does stick Kakaitas in there. So he's got Kakaitas, 1 Jian, and he's only got 2 temples. So slightly more late game options to kind of pivot there. He even runs a copy of Ruby as well. So that's pretty neat, actually, you know, just to give you that flexibility. What do I need? I need heal. Okay, I haven't got my Maddening Benison in hand, right? Maybe I'll use Ruby and see if I can dig for some heal. Or, you know, he's getting into the late game and he's just got all this, like, nonsense in hand, like a dose and stuff like that. Instead, he gets rid of one of them and then suddenly finds his Kakaitas or something. So, yeah, they're both really interesting to me. I think it's great that this is the last week of the meta and we're seeing these kind of these moderations to the tier 1 deck. And his spell boost is looking pretty standard, to be honest. This might be one of the most standard versions of that we see. He does have a single copy of the Flames in there. A lot of spell booster dropped AoE and things like that, but I always quite like, when I play this deck, I quite like having a single copy of Flames there for the AoE. That can get pretty big late in the game. Next up, we've got Alijan Pro. You love it, don't you? You all love hearing me pronounce difficult words with my Yorkshire accent. This is the only European player actually representing, and pretty cool. He's brought Mode Abyss. He was the other person. I apologize earlier. I said there was one Mode Abyss. No, there wasn't. Actually, no, I think I did say there was a few. Yeah, and Alijan Pro has actually piloted this Mode Abyss very well. This is a deck he feels very confident in. and it's pretty standard mode, really. The biggest thing that stands out for me is the single copy of Mukan. So I'm not sure what the thinking is for the Mukan, but obviously that is, you know, everything else is pretty standard, really, exactly what you'd expect. I also think it's kind of interesting that he's gone with one Cerberus. I kind of like that in Modibus, if I'm honest, because Cerberus is not really like your, he's not really like your Wincon, and you want to be using Super Evos on the things like the Congregant and things like that, especially once mode's triggered. So that makes extra Cerberuses just a little bit lame, if I'm honest, and so only having one copy does make a lot of sense. I do think you still need one copy, and maybe you could even push to 2, but I do think it's wise to not run 3. So there are actually a couple of subtle techs in there, and also what that allows him to do by dropping down to only one Cerberus and not leaning on that, it allows him to play the 1 cost card, because obviously you would never do that normally, because when Cerberus Super Evos, it could end up bringing this back as a dead 1 drop from early in the game. That's why you never see those 2 together. But because he's gone down to 1, that allows him to do this. So this is really, really interesting tech, actually, from Alijan Pro. Really, really cool. And last but not least, he is the only player to bring the Roach Forest Craft, which is really interesting because only a weekend ago we had the Japan finals and GP, and there were like five combo roaches. Only one in this tournament, but this deck is doing very well, and it has some great matchups with all of the Rune that we've seen and all of the Haven that we've seen. Remember, this is a best of 3 format, so this is this looks like a pretty solid lineup, to be honest. So that is everything, guys, for this week's Meta Snapshot. Just to remind you, this is what I think the overall picture looks like. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed this. Stay tuned to the channel for lots more Shadowverse World Beyond content coming up, because this week we are going to be jumping into the new set 4. So thanks for all the support. Hit that like and thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao for now.